Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Let us continue with our tafsir of Surah An-Nisaa بحول wa quwwatih. Ayah number 56. قال الله تعالى: إن الذين كفروا بآياتنا سوف نصليهم نارا كلما نضجت جلودهم بدلناهم جلودا غيرها ليذوقوا العذاب إن الله كان عزيزا حكيما. So the words of this ayah: indeed those who kafaru bi ayatina, reject our ayat. Kufr linguistically means ingratitude, which is to cover up a ni'mah that was given to you. But here it means to reject the ayat. Ayat kawniyah and shar'iyah, both are included. So the ayat shar'iyah, of course, the ayat of the Quran. Ayat kawniyah, universal signs, like the sun and the moon and the world and the nature around you. These are all signs that point to a creator. He says, we will nuslihim naran, which means we will enter them into a fire, referring to the fire of Jahannam. Kullama nadijat, this is from nadija yandaju, to be cooked. It's often used in the food context, but here it's talking about the julud, plural of jild, skin. Every time their skin is properly cooked, we would baddalnahum, exchange them, juludan, with a skin, ghayraha, other than it, meaning other than the first one. So they will be replaced with a second skin. Why is this? لِيَذُوقُوا الْعَذَابِ. The lam is ta'leel, so that they may taste the punishment. Indeed, Allah is Aziz. This is a name we have spoken about. It has three meanings to it. And Hakim, this is also a name which has preceded. Again, this also has three meanings attached to it: Hakim, Hikmah, and Muhkim. As for Aziz, this is the Azizul Qadr, Azizul Qahr, and Azizul Imtina'. Notice that the ayah speaks severely about the kuffar and their punishment, and it ends off with names which are also severe in nature. These are not names which give off the meaning and a sense of mercy and gentleness and pity. These are names which are much more hard-hitting. As for the skin being exchanged for a different skin, then when the skin is totally burnt, you do not feel any pain, because your pain receptors are completely burnt, and so therefore a new skin is applied. Now, because the fire of Jahannam is 70 times hotter than the fire of this world, it would mean that the skin would be completely roasted through almost immediately. However, the how of it, meaning how this all happens, we have no idea. Therefore, we just affirm the words on their apparent meaning in the way that Allah Jalla wa Ala intended them to be affirmed and understood. So, reflecting on this ayah, we find a harrowing description of Jahannam. And this is one such an evidence. We have in the ahadith many narrations which speak about the horrors of Jahannam. For example, in the Sahihain, ما بين منكبي الكافر مسيرة ثلاثة أيام للراكب المسرع. Between the shoulder blades of a kafir, meaning in Jahannam, is the distance of 3 days for a quick rider, which gives the sense that the kuffar are going to be huge in Jahannam, absolutely giants of giants, because the fire is going to puff them up. And the wisdom behind that is, when you are large, then there are more points of contact for the fire, and that just simply increases your pain. Also, we find in Muslim and Tirmidhi, Dirsul Kafir or Nabul Kafir mithlu Uhud. The gum or the canine tooth of the kafir in Jahannam is going to be the size similar to that of Mount Uhud, and that's just a tooth. And he says in the same narration, وَغِلَظُ جِلْدِهِ مَسِيرَةُ ثَلَاثَةِ أَيَّامٍ, and the thickness of his skin will be the distance of 3 days' journey. So they will be unimaginably huge. And then this is most of mankind in Jahannam, so it gives you the sense of how vast Jahannam itself is. And we also take from this that these matters of the Akhirah, whether it is Jahannam, as in this ayah, or even Jannah, these are corporeal matters, meaning physical, pertaining to the body. These are not just spiritual matters, like your spirit is being punished without any body. No, these are corporeal matters. Just as a resurrection is not just a spirit resurrecting, or your consciousness, or stuff like that, some type of spiritual world. No, it's very much corporeal, because spirits do not have a skin, bodies do. We also take from this ayah the two names of Allah Jalla wa Ala, along with their attributes, of course. And we also take that this punishment that the kuffar are going to endure is based upon wisdom, hikmah, as Allah is Hakim. So hikmah is to put things in their proper place for a praiseworthy goal. And also because he uses these names together, we may conclude that his izzah is linked to his hikmah, because if he was just Aziz without any hikmah, then he would be a tyrant, because tyrants also have izzah, but they do not have hikmah, so they act haphazardly and do things which everyone will regret. But Allah Jalla wa Ala is far removed from acting haphazardly. Ayah number 57. وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ سَنُدْخِلُهُمْ جَنَّاتٍ تَجْرِي مِنْ تَحْتِهَا الْأَنْهَارُ خَالِدِينَ فِيهَا أَبَدًا لَهُمْ فِيهَا أَزْوَاجٌ مُطَهَّرَةٌ وَنُدْخِلُهُمْ ظِلًّا ظَلِيلًا. The vocabulary: and those who amanu, believe, and amilu salihat, they work righteous deeds. The word as-salihat is a sifa, it is a description. What is it describing? It is describing the word a'mal, but the word a'mal is not mentioned because it is implied. So it would read وَعَمِلُوا الْأَعْمَالَ الصَّالِحَاتِ. The salihat has the ta at the end. It is maksura with a kasra because it is mansub, and it does not take a fatha when it is mansub, because a plural feminine word does not take a fatha when it is mansub. And he says, and we will enter them into jannat, gardens. Notice here he says we will enter them, and in the previous ayah he says nuslihim naran. He does not say sanudkhiluhum naran, because the verb sala ash-shay, yaslu salyan, means to throw something into the fire. The verb saliya yasla means to be burnt, as in being burnt by the fire. So nuslihim is specific to the fire, whereas adkhala yudkhilu idkhalan just means to make something enter something else. It is general. So jannat, we have spoken about this word before. Tajri min tahti al-anharu khalidina fiha. This comes up many times. Abadan means without end. So that is for an infinite number of years or days, or for an infinite time. Khalidina is hal, and abadan is what they call dharf zaman. It talks about the time period. It is mansub because khalidina is also mansub, but it is mansub bil ya because it is jam mudhakkar salim, as is well known. He says they will have azwaj, which is a plural of zawj. Zawj means a pair. Zawj can also mean a category or a type of thing, but often it's used to denote a spouse, as is the case here. They will have purified spouses. Okay, purified how? Because these wives of such people will not menstruate, and menstrual blood is impure. But they are also purified in the spiritual sense, in that they will not have bad manners or characteristics and that type of thing which could anger the husband and annoy the marital partner. So people in Jannah are purified physically and spiritually. And he says, وَنُدْخِلُهُمْ, who will enter them, ظِلًّا, ظil means shade, ظَلِيلًا, this is the sifa, the description of dhil. Now dhalil means shaded or shady, so it means that we will enter them into shaded shades. Now one might say, obviously a shade is shaded, so what's the point in saying dhillan dhalila? And the point here is that the shade would be perfected shade, because sometimes in the hot summer you could be sitting in a shade and yet still feel hot. You may still feel scorched by the heat. But in Jannah it is not like that. The shade is perfected shade and ongoing and permanent, where you are not bothered or hurt or annoyed by the scorching heat. So reflecting on this ayah, we notice the justice of Allah Jalla wa Ala. In the previous ayah, He spoke about the people of Jahannam, and in this ayah, He balances the scales by speaking about Jannah. And this is how we should be, always balanced. We also find from this ayah that saying I believe or taking the shahada, this is not enough. You need to couple your iman with righteous actions. Because in this ayah, He gives us two conditions for entering Jannah, iman and al-a'mal as-salihat. Now your righteous actions are part of your iman, but they receive a special mentioning because they can be easily overlooked. People could just say, oh look, I'm a Muslim, I believe, and that's enough. Because people are naturally lazy and they are always looking for shortcuts. This is why it makes sense to make special mention of righteous actions. We learn about the description of Jannah, gardens with rivers flowing, and this is the most common description given of Jannah in the Quran. Otherwise, there are many narrations which give detailed descriptions of the various aspects of Jannah. We find that the people of Jannah will be in there forever. So the life in Jannah will not end, because the word abadan, which means without end. We find that the wives of the people of Jannah are purified both physically and spiritually. There is no such thing as dirt in Jannah. The smell and the fragrance would be desirable. There is no smelly areas in Jannah. We learn something about the temperature of Jannah as well, when He talks about permanent and perfected shades. So the temperature is neither cold nor hot. It is just right. Ayah number 58. Inna Allah ya'murukum an tu'addu al-amanati ila ahliha wa idha hakamtum bayna an-nasi an tahkumu bil-'adli. Inna Allah ni'imma ya'idukum bihi. Inna Allah kana sami'an basiran. He says, indeed Allah orders you, ya'murukum, an, to addu, from adda yu'addi, it means to perform something or fulfill something. Al-amanat, plural of amana, which is a trust. So He orders you to render back the trusts. Ila ahliha, to their owners, meaning to the one to whom it is due. So for example, a person gives you some wealth for safekeeping. Okay, that's fine. When the time elapses, you need to return this wealth to its rightful owner, because that wealth is an amana in your hands. For example, a person lends you some money. Fine, you may use the money, but when the time comes, you have to render it back to its proper owner. That type of thing. وَإِذَا حَكَمْتُمْ, when you judge بَيْنَ النَّاسِ, between people, أَن تَحْكُمُوا, that you should judge, بِالْعَدْلِ, with justice. Justice is وَضْعُ الشَّيْءِ فِي مَوْضِعِهِ اللَّائِقِ بِهِ, to place something in its proper, suitable place. So we are ordered to judge with justice. Now justice is what is dictated in the Quran and the Sunnah. For example, if the conditions are met, then the hand of the thief is to be cut off. This is justice. It may be brutal, but it is justice, because Allah Jalla wa Ala only orders justice. So if you have this thief and you give him a different punishment, let's say imprisonment or community service or something of that nature, this is not justice, even if the people deem it to be justice. And in those areas in which the Sharia does not give us detailed guidelines, then we look to the customs of the people to decide what justice is. And so justice would be what people deem to be justice, as long as it does not contradict any aspect of the deen. And then he says, indeed Allah ni'imma ya'idukum bihi. Ni'imma is ni'ma added to ma, mim alif. So it becomes ni'imma. And we said before, ni'ma means it was excellent, so it is a praise. Just like bi'sa, the opposite of that, means it was bad. So it means ni'ma ma ya'idukum bihi. how excellent is what he preaches. The bihi meaning with it. The it refers to what has preceded, where Allah orders you to render the trusts back to their people and to judge with justice. So all of this is an excellent preaching. The word ya'idukum from wa'adha ya'idu, to preach. So maw'idha is an admonition. Indeed, Allah was always the Sami' al-Basira, the hearer and the seer. There is an example of this ayah being put into practice by the Prophet. When the Prophet conquered Mecca, he entered the Kaaba, and the keys for the door of the Kaaba were held by a man called Uthman ibn Talha. The Prophet took the keys from him, he entered the Kaaba, he prayed, and then afterwards he returned the keys to Uthman, and he was reciting this ayah. إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَأْمُرُكُمْ أَن تُؤَدُّوا الْأَمَانَاتِ إِلَى أَهْلِهَا. So reflecting on this ayah, we take that Allah refers to himself in the third person singular when he says Allah orders you. And this is a show of ta'zim, that he is venerating his own self, and he is worthy of veneration, of course. It's similar to when he refers to himself in the first person singular with the royal we. We learn in this ayah two vital orders to render back the trusts, and even though the main purpose of this ayah is talking about wealth, but amana is broader than that. So for example, it can include non-wealth issues. For example, giving the testimony in a court of law. That is an amana that you have, and you have to fulfill this amana. Or even something trivial as keeping a secret. If somebody tells you a secret, that is an amana. You're not allowed to go and just reveal it to the whole world. As for judging with justice, then the ulama are particularly fussy about this. They say that the judge should speak to both disputants equally and look at them equally and not show any preference whatsoever, even if one is a Muslim and the other is a kafir. We take that this deen is a deen of adl, of justice, not necessarily musawa, equality. And this is particularly important to know because many kuffar, particularly in the West, are obsessed with equality. We can also take that the ahkam of the deen, such as a couple given in this ayah, are called maw'idha. Now normally maw'idha, meaning admonition, pertains to targhib and tarhib, those ayat or hadith which make you desirous to perform righteous actions and enter Jannah, and also those from the hadith which talk about Jahannam and make you fearful of evil deeds. It's the type of thing that you might hear in a khutbah of a Jum'ah. It's not really orientated around ahkam of the deen. But in this ayah, Allah Jalla wa Ala does not give us any targhib nor any tarhib. He simply gives us an order, a couple of them of course, and He calls it maw'idha. And finally, we take the two names of Allah Jalla wa Ala, Sami'an Basiran, with their appropriate sifat or descriptions. هذا والله أعلم.